everyone, and welcome to a new episode of It's Just Feminism, where we try to answer some simple yet complicated questions like what is feminism, who are feminists, what do feminists do, and can feminism actually change the world? Well, the guests of this series will show you by example that not only does feminism have potential to change the world, they're actively doing it. My name is Aurora, I'll be your host, and joining me today are Lindsay and Connor to talk about their beautiful anthology that they edited and also contributed to with their poetry called 1,000 Tiny Awakenings. That is a highly appropriate name for this anthology, and soon you'll see why, so make sure to stick around until the end to find out more from them, to get inspired by them, to find out more about the other artists that are included in this anthology, and about the ways that you can practice decolonialized love and acceptance and even kink. Stay tuned for that. As always, make sure to support us by clicking that like button, subscribe button, as well as commenting or sharing this content with your friends and family. We appreciate your support, and we also appreciate Holly from River Street Writing, who organized this whole thing and made it possible once again, so thank you, Holly. Without further ado, let's get into the episode, and thank you, Lindsay and Connor, once again for being here today with me to talk about your beautiful anthology. It is a beautiful collaboration of many very talented artists, and you use this anthology to speak out about some very important experiences, especially of marginalized communities. It's a beautiful testament of resistance, of hope, of reimagining some other world, but also pointing fingers at some pop cultural moments that we have, such as the fascination with the apocalypse in the fiction that actually has some colonial and racist things beneath it. So can't wait to get into that one.
Thank you for asking us on here. I'm excited to discuss.
For starters, can you introduce yourself a little bit? Where are you from? What do you do? And what do you stand for? Lindsay, we can start with you.
My name's Lindsay Mayhew. I'm a spoken word poet, an editor, and an author, and I was born and raised on the traditional lands of the Attikmikshing Anishinaabeg, the traditional lands of the Wahnapitae First Nation, which is situated within the Robinson-Huron Treaty of 1850, but that's widely known as Sudbury, Ontario, which is a city in Canada. I am also an academic, and I recently graduated from my master's in English literature at Guelph. I work in marketing. I work at the local publishing house, Latitude 46 Publishing. I'm very active in slam poetry, which, if you don't know, it's like a spoken word competition. And in 2024, I competed and placed as a runner-up in the Women of the World Poetry Slam in Baltimore. And in April, I'm going to Vancouver to compete in the National Poetry Slam. So that's exciting. So my work generally features feminism. I really like to focus on breaking free from shame and religious trauma. I discuss mental health, human rights issues, and in that particularly, I like focusing on gender rights and decolonization, sexuality rights.
It's amazing, and I truly wish you all the luck on the competition. It's not easy, like I can't even imagine being put on a spot like that to create rhymes.
Intense.
Oh my god, incredible. And Connor, what about you?
Typically introduce myself in Anishinaabe, so ani bojo kanawaya get bobish komoko Indigenous and Kings Indigenous kendan donjaba baneshin dondem Anishinaabe nindao and swakamak and donda untugoshmo jaganashmo me bangi Anishinaabe and the market bamadzing noke and down shkabewis and dao. So my name is Connor Lafortune. I'm from Doki's First Nation in northeastern Ontario on the Robinson-Huron Treaty Territory of 1850. I currently live in the Swakamak or Sudbury, where Lindsay lives as well. I work in harm reduction, Indigenous education, and life promotion, and so health and wellness for Indigenous people. And I often intersect that with my art. And so doing poetry, doing regalia making, beadwork. I love combining art and academics and mental health programming to really give a wholesome picture of what experience is and what it can offer. I'm a spoken word artist, musician. I've dabbled in other art forms, but really being a poet has been my gift, my purpose as an artist. And it's been really an amazing opportunity to bridge those gaps between academics. So I'm doing my thesis in a Master's of Indigenous Relations at Laurentian University, where I bridge that gap and write my thesis through poetry and being able to bring those storytelling, those natural aspects of Indigenous culture into the academic space. I mostly work with Indigenous communities in teachings, in ceremony, in circle, and that is a very naturally poetic space. And so it just feels right to do so. I have a double honor specialization in Indigenous Studies and Social Justice and Gender Equity, and those are kind of the aspects that I bring to my poetry, mainly focusing on Indigenous history, Indigenous futures, breaking down colonization, and really packing it into like a neatly woven package of just being like, here's what I have to offer. Please reflect on it. Please, share your thoughts, but also take some time to learn. I mainly write my poetry for Indigenous people, but my audience is a wide range of different folks who grasp my material. So I'm just really, I'm just really grateful to be able to share. And I do identify as Lindsay Mayhew's biggest fan. So I like.
That's incredible. I love that you found a way to use academia to cross that bridge and actually decolonialize knowledge through that, because it's hugely important. And I also applaud you for finding like creative ways for writing a thesis, because I love creative thesis. Like, don't just write a basic paper of 25 pages and call it a day. Like, put your soul in it, and you're doing that, and that's wonderful. You have both mentioned something that I want to find out more now, and that is the drive to do something with others, to promote your values and work together. So how do you see that connection between art and activism or advocacy? How does it all go together?
I think that the way that I see art and advocacy and activism intersecting, so many leaders in human rights activism were artists and poets and painters and musicians and singers. And we see these like cultural elements still existing today, and they took shape at really important times. They bring the philosophy and morality and education, and they also bring an element of accessibility to activism so that people can understand it in a way of almost a different language. For music, for example, it gives the listener an opportunity to tap into ideas that maybe they would have been closed off to in another medium if it was given to them as a speech. And I think by sharing our gifts with each other, our voice and our words and our story, our perspectives, it really is a gift to other people, because it allows them to open their heart and their minds to things that otherwise they wouldn't have. And it really normalizes the ideas that we're discussing as well, bringing them into the mainstream. We should be talking about it in school and at work and in all of these spaces, but sometimes it has to start in a poetry book first. So I personally believe that in a very tangible way, there is short story in our collection as well, but it is a lot of poetry. And as a poet, I truly do believe that it has so much potential for breaking boundaries and building new connections and relationships. So in my final project for my master's degree, I was analyzing a poet, Billy Ray Belcourt, and specifically his collection, This Wound is a World. And what I was looking at is how he uses poetic form and the space on the page to subvert Western ideology. He's actively acknowledging and refusing colonialism in his work. And he detaches his community from negative feelings, colonial feelings like misery and dying. And he actually builds, this is what I argue anyway, he builds new avenues for belonging and hope through poetic form. I mean, I think that a lot of the time, prejudice and ignorance is a failure of imagination, because we can't comprehend how our world could look any different than it is right now. And so it's sometimes the job of poets and artists to be the creative mind to help us think outside of these boxes and these oppressive systems.
That's beautiful, truly, and I think it especially comes alive in your poem Feeling as an Organ is a Symphony, but we'll get into more details about that one. Connor, what do you think about the connection between art and the advocacy?
Definitely wholeheartedly agree with Lindsay. For me, poetry is an aspect of world building, is an aspect of abolition praxis, of being able to revitalize, reform, reject, and do so in such beautiful and meaningful ways. I have a very special relationship with poetry. As I mentioned earlier, ceremony for me is an aspect of poetry. When I am doing performance poetry, I often have the voice that I would carry in ceremony. It is a very like rhythmic and neutral tone, and I do have some poems that yell a little bit more, but I still have that very like grounding voice when I'm speaking. There's just such a beautiful way that you can share messages through poetry that you otherwise, like Lindsay said, would not get anybody to listen to. One thing about performance poetry is that when I am looking out to a crowd, I see exactly who is there. And if you're uncomfortable about learning on colonial history, you're uncomfortable with whiteness, you're uncomfortable with all those things, I will see you leave. I will see you get up. And so there is like an aspect of power that you have over the room, that is just there of saying like, I know that you're uncomfortable and you must sit and stay in it, because that's how so many of us live, and it's important for you to sit in that discomfort and to feel reflective afterwards and to seek knowledge. Poetry and activism works hand in hand because there's so many ways that the language just transcends boundaries too, of age, of interpretation. The beauty of storytelling in that way is that you can have 1,000 different people interpret a poem differently, and they might have one thing that keeps them all grounded into the one thing, but they all apply it to their experience. And the way that I like to write poetry is in this way that transcends the boundaries of space and time. And so you're actually physically transporting people to the worlds that you're creating. And so it's important to create that in a way that like facilitates conversation and dialogue. It almost exists outside of where we are politically or socially. And so it's like this moment where you can take people to where you're creating things, and we can have these conversations. And maybe when we come back to the real world, those conversations stop, but at least we had them in those little moments. And I think that those little moments live with us, and the more that we have them, the more that we change and grow and see injustice around us. As a queer Indigenous person who's a poet, when I first heard Billy Ray Belcourt, I was like blown away, because I was just like, oh wow, he's all of me in a different font, and it's beautiful and it's amazing, and I didn't know that I existed. I didn't know that I needed that. And I think that poetry and art in general offers that as well, offers possibility of being, being from a very small community, not knowing that art was something that I could pursue as something serious. It was just, something that I did, and a person that I was, but being able to see it around me has been so empowering. Being able to speak about my identity, speak about myself, be able to advocate for other communities that maybe I would feel uncomfortable doing so in a speech, but through poetry, I can facilitate those conversations so effortlessly. Can't say that word effortlessly, but that's okay. But there's this beauty that exists in art, where you can go get people and you can reach yourself in so many beautiful ways.
That is true. I love that point, that art not only connects us with other people, but with ourselves too. So there is that beautiful potential in it. And you both mentioned language as part of course, sending the message and for the person to receive that message. But in the preface of your anthology, you also say our words are revolution. So can you elaborate on that? What is that power of words, and why is it so crucial that through poetry or through literature of any kind, we provide that space for revolution to make its seeds?
Connor, for example, is talking about all the beautiful ways that he brings space for revolution or abolition into like a real life space. But for a lot of people, I think that writing is one of the only spaces where they can actually explore those ideas of revolution. And it's kind of where the seed starts, that's where they plant it, and hopefully it'll grow into something else because they can disseminate it amongst their readers. And it's so important that we have those open spaces to explore those ideas. Obviously, there comes a point where I'm such a big fan of poetry. I'm like, poetry can change the world. But obviously, there needs to be more than just poems about revolution. There needs to be actual structural change, and there needs to be embodied practice, which, Connor, just for example, is putting those things into practice. But yeah, poetry is a great place to start to bring revolution into a physical space or conversation.
I agree that just speaking is not enough, that speaking has to be backed up by actual action, but that action can get inspired by words. So it is a beautiful cohabitation of those two things, like the language and its powers and the power of action and the agency that actually kind of goes through both. Connor, what are your thoughts?
I was thinking of revolution in the ways that we introduced authors into this anthology. I base myself a lot on the teachings that I've received because those storytelling practices is what really leads my voice as a writer. And one of the things that we used to have in Indigenous communities prior to like colonial imposition is that everyone had a seat at the table. You had elders, you had youth, you had folks of all different abilities, of all different voices, of all different visions, and we all had a seat at the table and could speak to political matters, to anything, to policy, what policy looked like for us in Indigenous communities. But everyone was there. And with the introduction of colonization, it was really only men who could speak, and often older men. And so our elders lost their voices, our children, women, our communities lost their ability to listen to each other. And one of the things one of my elders, John Rice or Zagosage, talks about is that our youth have finally had the courage to speak, but as adults we have to have the courage to listen as well. And so when I think of revolution, when I think of this anthology of having young voices, I think of that courage that it takes to just speak, but also of all of our readers being willing to listen and to believe and to set aside their understanding of experience and really immerse themselves into what our young people are experiencing in the world right now, how it feels to be thrown into disaster in a very overt way, and to witness disaster and to bear witness to all of this violence that we are seeing. It takes a lot of courage, it takes a lot of revolution to just be able to sit and read something of this magnitude. I think as young writers as well, we're often removed from certain spaces. As poets, I think we have a very beautiful and thriving spoken word community in Sudbury that is very young, and I know that in bigger cities as well. But there is still a bit of disconnect between older poets and younger poets, and I think it goes with difference in style, different in experience, difference in rigidity of form as well. So when I think of revolution, there are also those small acts of revolution of like being able to set yourself aside and the willingness to listen and to bask yourself in the world that other people are experiencing. Are those small acts of revolution can actually create some profound change in the end.
That is beautiful, and yeah, it's interesting to think about the poem form itself as a space for revolution, and then about who writes the poems or who cites them as well. What you say truly seeps through the whole anthology. All of the pieces that you wrote and all of the pieces that other people also contributed to, they all speak of that wonderful drive to make the world a place where you can speak up, where you can unapologetically be yourself, where you can point fingers at what is not right in the society around us, and to show that before we had the heritage of colonialism and racism and patriarchy, there were other ways to imagining how the world can be. And that can help what you, Lindsay, said about that power to even imagine that other world. And honestly, I have to admit that it took me coming to Canada and engaging with Indigenous texts through my work at university to actually find out how true that is. Because, I mean, I studied history and sociology and anthropology in Croatia. And one of the things that would always be mentioned when it comes to social structure is that patriarchy is the normal nominal type, and matriarchy doesn't exist. It didn't exist, maybe it did somewhere, but it's such a minuscule population, doesn't even make sense to, worry about that. Patriarchy is where, the shit is real. And then I came here and started working, and the texts that we give students to read all speak about the matriarchy of the Indigenous communities, of the importance of women, of the importance of elders and the children, and how everybody contributes in some way. And then came the white man and ruined it all for people, and then had the audacity to say that it didn't even exist. And that's such an epistemological violence that is important to break. I honestly feel like bad, I guess, that I had to come here and then be exposed to that type of literature to find out about it, because I didn't know about it before. It wasn't part of any type of professional training or reading list or anything else. So I really, I want people who are watching this to get inspired to seek those types of literature, and I will put some in the description as well to inspire them to do so and to see some of those topics that we can learn from Indigenous community, because it's important. I believe that no white person has the audacity to say that the Indigenous community shouldn't be included in the new reimagining of the world. That's just outright horrific, and especially what's happening in the US with Trump saying he wants to deport the Indigenous community, who are the rightful protectors of the land. It just doesn't sit right. So I believe it's important more than ever to expose ourselves to these topics, and the anthology that you edited and wrote some parts of, I believe, are a great start, because it is art, so it is a bit easier, as you said, to confront those topics. So can you tell us a bit more about the book itself? How did it came to be? What triggered its manifestation in reality? Connor, do you want to?
Actually, might pass it to Lindsay, just because I was invited onto the project, and so Lindsay has a little bit more of the first scoop on how this started.
I think it started as a conversation about wanting to uplift youth and emerging voices, emerging artists. That is what triggered the book. It is just a conversation about how do we bring these voices together? How do we want that to look? I was invited on as an editor as well, to bring these voices together, but I knew I wanted to work with Connor. We had been crossing paths like two comets always. And we did slam together as well, which is, I think, how we met initially. I loved Connor's work, and I saw we had a lot in common in terms of style and who we admired. So I hoped, and I was right, that it would be a great working relationship. It did start as that conversation of wanting to uplift youth. But when we sat down all together, we focused on what do we want the theme of the book to be? What can we ask people to share with us? And I think it was Connor that suggested this idea of breaking boundaries, and how it was open enough that we could invite different experiences and perspectives, but on theme enough that it would be about revolution and abolition, as we were talking about, and these things that we really wanted to tap into, which we did get such a wide variety of experiences and people's stories that they shared with us, but all of them were overcoming something in such a beautiful and prominent way. We really wanted to showcase how young people and the upcoming generation are tasked with understanding history and building a better future. So that was my perspective of the beginnings of the book. But Connor, please share anything I missed.
From my perspective, I was just so excited. The project seemed amazing. I also always wanted to work with Lindsay, and so it was just an excuse to spend more time together and really see how our creative minds work together. When I first heard about the anthology, I think it fit perfectly. I think if we were to redo it, it would fit even better now. I think there's so much that is revolutionary right now about our young writers, ourselves included, about how we're writing, how we're developing, how we've had to change our way of speaking to fit more accurately to the political climate that we are handed. I think it is a time where we hear less and less about just beautiful poetry. I think all of our poetry has beauty in it and has beautiful imagery, and we can speak about joy. But I think there is always revolution in everything that I'm hearing. The more that I attend just open mics and sharing sessions, and every time we are reading as young writers, we are talking about how we are fed up with how the system exists. We're fed up about how much we have to fight to breathe, to live, how much we have to work. There's something beautiful about the way that we're all itching towards revolution. And so it just is such a wonderful time for it to come out. And I almost want to do it all over again and see what else we can get, because there's so much beauty in that abolition, in the way that we can reform the system and change our points of view. I think it also is such a beautiful opportunity for us to learn from each other. We're all coming from, yes, the same idea of revolution, but all from different points of view. And so it offers readers and also the authors in the collection a chance to learn about experiences that are not their own. I think there's something beautiful about that, in a way that is about building community, building solidarity, and not about feeling isolated in the knowledge that you're receiving. It doesn't feel intimidating to read about your colleagues' experiences when you're also contributing a part of yourself. And I think that's one part about learning and about sharing those things. I do a lot of presentations where I'm talking about colonial history, and I got to a point where I was just like, I think that I need to receive more than I'm giving, because I'm just giving everything. I'm giving myself, giving my time, my experience, and it is simply draining me. A collection like this represents a refilling of that cup, where we can all share our stories. And to me, it's very reminiscent of when we sit in circle, in a circle, when we pass around the feather or a stick or a stone, we all share our experience, and we're not speaking to each other. We're just speaking to the abyss. We are speaking to this entity. And I think that is a beautiful way to collect these secrets or these stories in a way that we can allow people to learn from them.
That is true. Like, everybody has their own way of contributing. No knowledge is small knowledge or not important knowledge, and no experience is small experience or not important experience. So it's beautiful that you offer that space. How did you even choose which poems and which authors to work with to convey the messages you wanted to convey?
When I was first reading them, I was less focused on who the authors were. I really wanted to hear the stories and not be swayed a certain way, because as an Indigenous person, as soon as I see an Indigenous author, I'm like, I want to have them. I want to showcase their art. It's beautiful. It's amazing. We also have folks in our community that submitted, and so we tried to stay just in a way that we're reviewing the art form and what was being provided to us. And so reading the stories was really important. But then as a secondary measure, it's also important to listen to their point of view. And so a lot of metaphors and stories made a lot more sense once we contextualized it with who was writing it. So you can have a metaphor about violence, but until you hear what the point of view is, it really adds to the story. So as we were reading, it was just about what made us feel like we were stepping in the right direction with revolution, what made us feel in charge of our own stories. Just this aspect of like what gives us hope in these messages. And it's hard sometimes to read through these and be like, to decide whose stories are showcased. We also tried to keep them quite related. And so although there are many themes, there is a through line that is kind of added in. There's a lot of words that are repeated, and that's something that we tried to emulate in our last poem that we wrote together, of just trying to collect all those themes and placing them together. But there is a story that's within those words that is kind of through each poem, and that was important for us to keep in. We initially hadn't put any of our poems in yet. We had really just crafted the stories with the other authors, and then tried to make decisions on how our stories could act as bridges in between. So that's kind of how the layout works for the book itself. But really about seeing who spoke to us in a really profound way was how I really was thinking about it. Lindsay?
You expressed that beautifully. And like Connor said, it was at times very difficult to choose. And it's always tough to say no to work, even when it's beautiful. Sometimes, like Connor was saying, we were looking for themes that fit together. And so sometimes we're like, this is beautiful, but it just doesn't fit with the rest. So that was a tough thing that we had to navigate. But like Connor was saying, one of the things for me that I was looking for was just strong themes, important messages, obviously impactful writing, which we got a lot of. I was so happy to see an experimentation with form and the page in some of our submissions. And it was really exciting to work with people on their work. And it was such an honor to have people trust us with their story and work together on it. And yeah.
Sounds like a very beautiful yet very hard task to do, so I can't even imagine those hard decisions that you went through. But can we for a moment celebrate all the incredible people that contributed to this anthology? If you would share their names, something that you're especially proud about them, and one line from their poems that resonated with you and stuck with you even after you submitted that final final one file of the anthology.
Yeah, I'm going to start with a shout out to Chimdi Kinsley and Marua. Line that stood out to us immediately: "Make a man out of scarred boy, you get yourself a broken society." Just so profound. Young writer, really amazing combination of societal critiques, religious imagery. They create a stark and punchy piece that like is teeming with hard truths. There's self-actualization. There is like this becoming, and they described it so beautifully that it was amazing to read their stories and to also see them progress as a writer, because I've seen them in the literary community in Sudbury for a very long time. So that's been really beautiful. For Rana, Yamina, Ikundayo, their two lines for their poems are "Flinch at the stench of performance," which to me was just like so vivid, and I could almost like imagine myself in those spaces. And "Our wildest dreams taking shape." So this idea of becoming and the ancestors' wildest dreams being something that flows into those aspects. And their style is so beautiful. They use like really impactful imagery, but they weave you in, they bring you into the story. They really remove the ability for the reader to hide from the truth. And that's something that's really beautiful as writers, to be able to say, this is the violence that is occurring and you have no choice but to witness it. And they center Black experience, hardship. They're brilliant, and they talk about resurgence in such effortless ways. So Chimigwech to both of you. Another one of the authors is Kay Kaiser, and their line is, "My body belongs to God, so suicide is seen as stealing something that is not mine." Really amazing poem. I want you guys to read all of them, but it's really just an amazing line from that poem. And there's so many one-liners. There's such a good wit. It really makes you want more of their poetry, which is something that is really impressive as a storyteller. They're captivating, and you can really see that they started in spoken word because the way that their imageries flow is so reminiscent of how you speak them. There's also Lisa Shen. Their line is, "When the days are too much to carry, I carve time into sand grains." Sorry, I stuttered over that one. But this idea of breaking down those pieces was amazing. They're very refreshing in their exploration of survival, talking about perseverance, very lyrical, and they really make the reader feel heard and understood through their poetry, leaving us hopeful and like wanting more of those kind of beautiful stories. There's also Michel Delorme, and they had 2 poems in the anthology. "So I think I understand what melting feels like." And "Across the blackened landscape, green seedlings poke through dust and ash, a young forest reawakened." They bring focus to issues like climate change, as you can see from their metaphor, just the effects on today, what will come of tomorrow if we continue to treat the earth as we have. And it really, despite being so heart-wrenching, there's so much respect for the land and for the earth that it really brings that imagery for hope and healing and resurgence in those really harsh metaphors for how we treat the land. There's also Jesse June Jack. Their lines of "Drowning is another form of prayer," which I found like was just absolutely amazing. It's so rich and vibrant. They have very lyrical imagery. You can really see the flow of the page. It is so bountiful the way that they write. There is so much, and there's so much more that is left unsaid that is really like you could read between the lines. And their language and exploration of love has been just so inspirational. And finally, my final poet, the one that's true to my heart, Lindsay Mayhew. "Isn't shame just another name for possibility? Horror is a legacy leaving acid on my lips, and cities built on stolen lands have only ever been taught how to take." That last line for me is just so absolutely amazing. I am always stunned by Lindsay's ability to weave metaphor and rhythm and just being such a flawless performer. Absolutely would recommend watching any videos of her performing because you will not regret it. Her use of just like these really harsh concepts in beautiful ways, and sometimes really beautiful concepts in vulgar ways, is so beautiful. It subverts what you're trying to see. It makes you kind of squirm, and it is absolutely beautiful. And I hope to read everything that she's ever written in my lifetime. That is my life's goal. So I'll pass it on to Lindsay.
Yes, thank you, Connor. So we have the other half of the contributors in the anthology, starting with Wad Hassan. Her line is, "A mirror held to a fragmented world, each line a boundary, yet a bridge." Wad was actually in my master's. Well, she was a PhD student at Guelph when I was in my master's degree, also in English literature. So shout out to Wad. She has a extremely beautiful experimental form, which is super gripping and very ingenuitive. It struck me right away. And the way that she has the words appearing on the page, it really draws the reader in and allows them to actually experience the poetry. Wad has that great ability to bring the reader into the story. We also have Nicole Robitaille, and her line is, "Grooming her as carefully as one would polish a gun." And that poem is actually about a dog, so it's fitting that you have your dog with you. Or it's not about a dog, but it features a dog. And Nicole has really poignant metaphors, very vivid storytelling. And I love the way that Nicole experiments with past and present. This poem is importantly writing about our history of enslavement. And it's a very important piece. And in that relatively short amount of space on the page, Nicole is able to have the reader connect with the characters. And Nicole beautifully displays the depth of the characters' survival and their resurgence. So it is truly a shining piece in the anthology. The next contributor is Sydney Reed. I personally really loved Sydney's work. So her two lines are, "And one day we will meet to give thanks and eat our tails together." The second line is, "Take my body for your body, as wine blood, as body bread, and remember I made you." So I write a lot personally about feminism and religious trauma. So these poems, I was like, yep. Specifically, what is so amazing about Sydney is she captivates the reader with her tender exploration of form. She also has a beautiful experimental use of the page, and she has really evocative imagery and a beautiful way of portraying womanhood and shame. And she brilliantly fractures these harmful narratives with her form, which is something I really admire. Our next contributor is Carson Bodie, and the line that we chose was, "And I surrender to my body a cage, one I wish I could escape." So this poem is really multi-layered in the sense that every time you read it, you walk away with a deeper understanding, which is really, really cool. Their form also brings the reader into this sort of sensory experience, feelings of pain and dysphoria, and they give the reader a window into what they were feeling at the time that they wrote it, perhaps. Our next contributor is Tyler Hine. The line that we chose was, "It sounds so strange to hear your voice lacking certainty, like a flame without heat." Hine, his story effervescently captures the struggles of youth and identity and capitalism. And it's really a sensational exploration of life. He draws the reader into the characters' lives and their relationship, almost as if you've known them for so long. I mean, I think everyone could read this story and think of people in their life who might be going through similar things, which is amazing. Our next contributor is Blaine Thornton. The line we chose was, "People living outside deserve to take up space." So Blaine uses storytelling and characterization in a way that is very unique and powerful to them. They cleverly use personification and metaphor to bring attention to mistreatment and dehumanization of unhoused individuals. They're a stunning writer, very talented. This piece is truly very beautiful. We also have Brennan Gregoire, who, shout out to Brennan, was the editor of the Sulphur Literary Journal, which is the journal at Laurentian, and I think he published me first, actually. So I was paying it forward, but also we chose it because it's such a beautiful story. So the line that we chose, how much in a life can come and go without any proof that you were there? So this story is really a heartfelt exploration of home and family, and he discusses common day racism in community. But the story overall is very touching, and it's nostalgic and hopeful at the same time. And he really carefully fleshes out and humanizes his characters. And the story is really beautifully paced. So that was something I really enjoyed. And then, of course, we have the editor, Connor. The lines that I chose for his 3 poems were, to you, he's just an activist. To him, it's simply living. Next poem. They have sharpened themselves with every word I never learnt as a child. And finally, I do not hoard love. I harvest it in baskets, keep them open on my shelf, spread fields of it in my yard. Connor, as you can tell just by hearing him speak, is such an incredibly talented, multi-talented person. He was mentioning at the beginning, not only is he a phenomenal writer, a revolutionary thinker, but he's also like a multimedia artist and works in so many different mediums, which is so cool. And I have had the privilege of seeing that work outside of this anthology. But he honestly has probably the best use of alliteration I've ever seen. And he can go from being so quippy and bouncy and just having this really playful rhythm in his work to being absolutely gut-wrenching and just delivering this beautifully heartbreaking line that also leaves room for hope. His poetry is also very lyrical. You can tell as well that he is a spoken word artist, and you can hear that in your mind as you read his work. It is so present. His words dance off the page. They want to be spoken. And so getting him to read his work and even hearing him read the ones that we're publishing in the anthology is always such a treat. And every image that he uses, at least this is my experience with his poetry, every reference to nature, every metaphor is always so meaningful. If you ask him, so what does this line mean? He'll tell you a whole story about it. There's like mini worlds in every single line, which is so amazing and so cool. One poem in this anthology, it brilliantly balances bilingualism in such a stunning way that, I mean, even if you don't understand French or speak Anishinaabe, you can appreciate it and really feel the work that he's doing in there. And I feel that you can tell by reading his work that he is a generous and giving and kind person. And a lot of the time, people say don't meet your heroes because they don't always live up to the work that they create. But Connor is not one of those people. He really lives up to the work that he puts out into the world, and he embodies that. So can never stop saying enough good things about him.
That is beautiful. Thank you. Thank you both for this effort to pick out lines from each poem. I believe that it was important because it is a collaborative effort. The anthology wouldn't be anthology without you two as editors, but also as you two as the writers and everybody else who contributed. So I believe it's important that everybody gets their little spot under the sunshine to show who they are and what their talents are, and we'll put in the description how people can find them and other work that they do. And now I want to get more into your own poems that you wrote in this anthology, to meet you more than what you just provided us. I love, Lindsay, your comment that you made, like words that want to be spoken, because that is something that I felt while reading this, while preparing for this episode. There's a momentum in it. Like when you start reading it, it builds up. Like it's like a snowball effect that's happening. But then every so often something pops up, like a very sharp argument, very difficult word, the strength of the heritage that is included in it all, and then it just echoes even more, and it's truly a beautiful testament. And as Connor said, like if you wrote it now, if you started editing it now, it might take a different form. And maybe you could do anthology point 2 or something, but I believe that this also captures like a very specific snippet in time and a very specific community of incredibly talented people who all joined in speaking out about imagining that new world, but also like shitting a bit on the world that we live in now, because we need it too. So it's a beautiful balance. So when it comes to your poems, Lindsay, we can start with you have Meteor Fragmenting, and in it you talk about like the dark realities of living in colonial Sudbury, but also some beautiful moments that you like reminiscent on when it comes to your childhood experiences. So I'm wondering, how do we even condone those and live in those contradictions of colonial urban cities? And what would you advise for young artists and poems living in Sudburys of the world, not only in Canada but elsewhere, where we have these beautiful communities that are facing some horrible types of violence from the institutions and from the hierarchies and everything else?
Thank you for that question. It's like you say, even though this poem is about specifically Sudbury and my hometown, it does include a lot of specificities about a landscape and different, landmarks. But it's like the Sudburys of the world, because these are institutional problems that can be found anywhere there is colonialism, there are a capitalist society, anywhere across the globe. And so for this poem, I really wanted to showcase the mosaic of experience, because I'm talking about colonialism as a white settler. And so that means that even though it does bring about a lot of violence, I have privilege from that system. And it has given me, I have clean water, I have access to all of these things. The system that privileges me is what oppresses other people. And so it's important to recognize that we are all underneath that system. And so for me, I was exploring things that are different than my previous two poems, which are about sexism, and I position myself in a particular way. So for this poem, I really wanted to acknowledge that privilege that I had in my life as both a child and now. And in terms of advice, I think there are a lot of reasons why well-intentioned people don't take a stand, why they don't look into these things. Sometimes it's hopelessness. Sometimes, like I mentioned, they can't imagine a world that looks any different than what we have. Sometimes they feel nervous or scared. They don't want to make a mistake by speaking out. They don't know what area they should be talking about, what maybe isn't their place. So there's a lot of different reasons why people hold back. And so I would say my advice is just to encourage people to allow yourself to be human, allow yourself to make mistakes, because that is how we learn. We're human beings. Anti-racism and decolonization, it takes that courage. It takes that extra step to be willing to put yourself in potentially a vulnerable situation, and be willing to speak out about those things, because we have the privilege to. There are a lot of activists and academics who are fighting to bring those structural changes into practice. So I really recommend looking towards those people to, just learn more. And learning more is like the best place to start. If you're nervous, if you're uncomfortable, that is just such a beautiful place to hear others and hear their voices. So I do have a couple recommendations. One of them being Leanne Bedesemosake Simpson, who is an Indigenous author, and she's also an academic. She's a poet, and her work is so fantastic. She wrote an academic article called Land as Pedagogy, which I highly recommend reading. And my other recommendation being Robin Maynard, who is an activist and an author herself. And they wrote a beautiful book together called Rehearsals for Living. And that book is about Black communities and Indigenous communities fighting alongside each other for mutual liberation. That book in itself is like, oh, there it is. Yes, perfect. Yeah, it's a really, it's an amazing book. I highly recommend. And the other thing is that I think this is an issue particularly amongst white people as well, is just needing to understand that there's a balance between there will be moments where you need to take a step back and allow other people to have that space and be their own voice. And in spaces where marginalized communities or people of color, Indigenous peoples, they don't normally get that space to speak to allow them to. But twofold, it's also really important to recognize that we should not be placing all the responsibility on people of color and Indigenous communities to fight for anti-racism and decolonization, because like I mentioned, we are all under this system, and there are some people who benefit from it and some people who are oppressed by it, but we are all being affected by it, whether we realize it or not. And so it's really important that we take up this responsibility and this work, because it is something that everyone can participate in and everyone should be participating in and fighting towards. So that would just be my bit of advice for people who are afraid to speak up or they don't know where to start. Reading is a beautiful place. And just know that it is our responsibility as well as white people, as settlers, to take up this work.
I wholeheartedly agree. Like, we have to do our homework and we have to use any type of power that we might have or influence or opportunities to actually speak out and take a stand, because if we're not gonna do it, like, we need to do it. It is our responsibility. And I also appreciate that you emphasize that you don't need to be perfect to speak out, because let's be honest, the opposite side, like, there is not a racist person that will stay silent about their racism until they can articulate it academically. Like, no, they just walk around the world and say racist shit all the time, and that's it. Like, if they can do that, we can do the opposite. Like, we can celebrate and we can collaborate and we can seed hope amongst each other, no matter how much we know about the topic or how personally connected we are with it. We can always do something to bridge that gap and learn more and ask people who have the experiences and echo their voices. Like, there is always something that we can do, no matter how qualified or personally connected or anything else we are. So thank you for that point. Connor, in your poem, which is a difficult read, not gonna lie, Indians in the Making, you rely on the categories of the Indigenous man, the dead Indigenous, the live Indigenous, the legal and palpable. And then you state one very interesting thing, and that is, I've came to realize that every horror movie is a Black and Indigenous reality. We lived through genocide, ongoing apocalypse, and famine. Is there a piece of Indigenous fiction or Indigenous futurism that you rely on to provide that type of representation and that type of orientation towards different type of exploration of those topics without it turning into just a gory, violent episode of violence over people of color? Like, why is it so crucial that we understand that there is that racist colonial underlining in apocalyptic fiction?
I absolutely love that question. It's funny because when I wrote it, it's meant to be very sarcastic and very, like, it teases in a very specific way, and I know, and I'm excited for it to make people uncomfortable. I think there's something beautiful for me about like using humor, a very specific type of humor, to make people kind of squirm in their feelings of those things. This piece emerged from Thomas King's book. He talks about the three categories of Indians, so legal, dead, and living, and he explores those themes through literature. Technically, Indigenous stories are often told as fiction because they are not provable, but they're mostly nonfiction. The most authors such as like I said, Thomas King, Wabagijik Rice, a lot, not Wabagijik, he writes fiction. I'll talk about that after. I meant, oh my God, Richard Wagamese. They're categorized as fiction, but they're really just tellings of their lives or stories of their lives. And they explore these terms in such interesting ways. And I think in modern society, in the culture that I live in, I wanted to add in that fourth one of the palatable Indian, of like what that looks like, what is good for the people around me, what does that actually feel like to be that person that is like liked, and to this moving beyond the concept of the good Indian, which is something that Leanne Simpson talks about as well, and something that I've experienced of being those versions of that good Indian, and breaking free from that being something that is so obviously freeing and beautiful, and can make a lot of people mad at you very quickly. And the piece is born from an essay that is submitted for my master's work, of just realizing like all of the pieces that we talk about in horror. So we talk about like the having to be quiet, folks in asylum, zombies, this idea of disease coming into our communities and ravaging our lands. Like they're so true. There's nothing that can be separated really from our experience of colonialism, from our daily lives. And so it's almost ironic. I'm a big fan of those types of film, but I think there's some comfort to them, because I know that we've existed through them and then we will again. And my thesis work is called Abolition Amongst Growing Annihilation, How Life Promotion is Guiding Indigenous Communities Past Survival. And it talks about that apocalypse, and the way of like amongst this continued apocalypse, how do we continue to thrive? And I think we've always operated under the umbrella of apocalypse, so it's very easy for us to talk about fiction in that way. So a writer like Wabagijik Rice, who Moon of the Crested Snow. There's also a book, Damali has a book called The Marrow Thieves. And I love reading those fictions of like the end of the world. And there's these like, there's either it's like zombies or this creation or this shock that like everybody's dying. I love reading it from Indigenous perspectives because the solutions are always what I do every day. And I love that. Like, it's just like, oh, we're going to be more land-based. We're going to make our own food. We are going to pull upon our spirituality to get the morale up. We're going to do all these things that we've always done, like trapping and hunting and fishing. And I'm just like, wow, this like fiction book is just an average weekend for me in Dokees. Like, it's just such a beautiful way for me to connect to the material, despite this ongoing pressure, which already exists. Like this metaphor of apocalypse is just like the presence of hatred, of violence, of oppression. And I think there's something beautiful about Indigenous people like laughing in the face of that, of just being like, what's next? Like what else do you have to hand me? I'll be ready. So I think that was like my attempt of speaking to that, and the irony of so much of it. Like I think in the pieces of just like these superficial looks of what Indigenous people look like. So the dead Indian just being like, yeah, I died a while ago, but you still think that I'm this mythical creature that still exists. And the legal Indian being like, I present in such a good way and I have my status, but it's still expired. And it's funny because I have a status card and I got it renewed just before my birthday because it was going to expire. But now I'm in this limbo where I'm waiting for it to come in the mail. And I'm like, oh, am I no longer... am I no longer an Indian now because of this status that bears weight over me? And I absolutely love the irony of that and how ridiculous it seems. And so trying to write those like experiences of just like, what the fuck is kind of my purpose for that one. So it was like an exploration of form. It's not something that I write in typically, very much so more in spoken word, but I was just like, this feels like something I need to get off my chest. And that's what came of it.
It's truly beautiful piece, really makes you think about stuff, and it also shows how white man's biggest fear in life is to be treated as he treats Indigenous people, as he treats Black people, as he treats women of any color, let's be honest. And that's what scares them. And then when we try to, fight for our rights and to be represented and to, have opportunities that we deserve and things like that, then it feels like a threat to them because they're not in the same type of position that they were before, and they fear, they can't even imagine that somebody could act in a different way than they're acting currently. We also appreciate the point that you made about surviving the apocalypse, because to the average person of white heritage, let's be honest, who lives in an urban setting, who lives in a mega city of some kind and works a desk job and things like that, they are totally removed from actual realities of physical and emotional survival. They don't know how to grow their food, they don't even know where the food comes from, what the animals have to go through for that food to be available to them. They don't appreciate it in that way. And then when they think about the apocalypse and living in the world where you're not sure if your water is going to be safe to drink and stuff like that, to them it's a nightmare they can't even imagine, so it's almost like a fantasy. But to Indigenous communities in Canada, for example, running water and drinkable running water is a privilege, especially where the pipelines go for the gas and oil. So it's important that we understand that for some it is fiction, and for some it is just another part of reality they have to go through. And that in those spaces there is that moment about thriving and not just surviving. So I think we truly can learn a lot from Indigenous communities about taking care of our mental health and taking care of the people around us, because it takes a village not only to raise the children, but to raise ourselves. It's very crucial. And in this poem you also have a very beautiful line that echoes the feminist movement, actually. You say, love is not always political, but Indigenous love is, though. And I truly find it a moment of reflection, to think about what love is and how we can practice it, and we'll get to decolonializing love a bit later. But for now, why do you believe that Indigenous love specifically has that revolutionary, beautiful moment in it?
Love is threatening. I think it threatens the very foundation of capitalism, of colonialism, of individualism. Indigenous love, in the way that it is practiced and it was practiced, was about reciprocity, was about giving all of yourself and receiving everyone's self as well. Even in our practices, we had potlatch. When we would do that, the actual practice of that is that you'd have a bunch of communities and you'd take turns hosting the potlatch. And what you did was you'd have everyone over and you would give absolutely everything that you had. Absolutely everything, all of your food, all of your clothes, everything that you harvested and made that year, you would give it all away, knowing that the next time you would go to someone else's potlatch, they would do the same. That connected piece, that love, that zagedowin is the way that we say it in Nishnabemwin. It is beyond just like, I think you're cute and I like you, or you're my son, so I love you. It is about giving everything that you have and knowing it will come back to you. Love in residential school was something that was so threatening. Holding hands, sharing words, being able to speak to each other and care for each other. That is why we were so segregated and isolated from each other, because our love is so powerful. Our love speaks through our language, through our actions, is our spirituality. We are a people of love. Everything that is spiritual, almost in Indigenous languages, relates back to the heart, our ode. And so things like a wagon, a drum, or strawberries is a heartberry. There's so much that connects back to that aspect of love and kindness and reciprocal nature. Even our word for being kind, minode, is a kind of heart. Like you are kind of heart. It is all about love. And so with that love coming back, there's nothing that is nothing that we are able to be stopped from doing. When we are speaking our languages, when we are gathering community, when we are sharing, when we are laughing, when we are holding hands, there's something so powerful about that love that it is the reason why colonization occurred so prominently towards our women and two-spirit kin, because they are our keepers of love. They are those who teach us how to nurture and how to be kind and how to share. And their resurgence in our communities is what is assuring our survival. I think that there is nothing unpolitical about our love and the way that we manifest it, and the way that it is just all-encompassing and exhausting and absolutely beautiful.
I totally agree, and it turns upside down the whole idea of the Western European philosophy, because they're all about the human nature, homo homini lupus and everything else. But Indigenous communities are a testament that is not true, and it doesn't have to be true. And we don't have to turn against each other, isolate each other from others, to be the strongest, the stoic version of ourselves, the lovely capitalist slave that doesn't have a community to support them and to turn to. In that moment of sharing everything that you have with each other, it goes like directly against the capitalist idea of private property. And it shows that it's possible to not be so damn selfish all the time. Because if you're selfish, you're gonna die. Like, it's not survivable to be selfish and to have selfish people around you. You have to be a part of the unit. And there is truly a lot that everybody can learn from, engaging with Indigenous practices of practicing love and being kind to each other, and not only to people. I think that's also important, but also it extends to the planet as our nurturer, and to the animals as our companions in this world, and to everything else that we have here. So I really hope that people will get inspired from listening this, to think about ways that they too can revolutionize love in their own personal lives, and find ways to use it as resistance and as a seed of revolution. Lindsay, in your poem Feeling is an Organ is a Symphony that you already mentioned, you also explore the topic of love. And you combine it with anger, with hysteria, and exploring what that means and the heritage of that word and all that it carries. You said that those are like potent forces that speak to us as whale songs. Why and how should we embrace those feelings of both anger and love, and maybe even hysteria, and reclaim it in some way on this path towards liberation and on our path to healing and imagining that new world?
I think this poem is interesting because I am exploring like a deeper academic thought, but it's also like emotion is so accessible to everyone. And so it's so easy to relate to feelings of anger or frustration. And so on like a very surface level, it's a very unifying experience for a lot of women, which is particularly who I'm writing to feel this anger and this outrage towards these sexist systems and day-to-day sexism that women experience, feminine people experience in social situations all the time. It's interesting because we are made to feel ashamed for expressing emotion that is not happiness. And we see this all the time. And it has been going on for a very long time, for as long as our society has been patriarchal. And I'm sure, like, of at one point when women were to express anything other than happiness, if they were to express sadness or depression or anxiety or any of these things, they were thought of as being hysteric. If they wanted a divorce, they were hysteric. Like this label of hysteria was given to them to silence them and silence their emotions and their ideas. And we see that in today's society as well. This is kind of a silly example, but like a woman speaking out is labeled a Karen now. And I think, at first that term Karen was using, referring to a particular person who was using their privilege to be, oppressive in a public space, but now it's basically just any woman who expresses any emotion at any time is a Karen. So I think a lot of women can relate to those feelings of anger and simultaneously not being able to express it without being shamed for it. And I think a really trendy topic as well right now is this idea of feminine rage. It's like a really powerful expression of womanhood and breaking expectations of needing to be docile and meek and gentle, and you just like, you let it all out. On the surface, I feel like that is so accessible for women to relate to and to understand. But another, in terms of the academic concept, something that I was really interested in this previous year in my studies was the idea of public feeling. And that's also referred to as affect theory. It's a group of people who experience an emotion because of this oppressive structure. So anger and shame are the emotional manifestation of living in patriarchy. And I'm really interested in how oppressive structures manifest in our bodies, and they manifest physically. And so I talk about that a little bit in the beginning of the poem, how because we are made to feel ashamed by being angry, that then becomes internalized and it gets deflected onto our own bodies. And so I kind of discuss that a bit in the beginning of the poem in terms of like breaking pencils over your kneecaps. So this internalized misogyny can become a physical manifestation. Our bodies can become our punching bag. This is partially why I make this connection between womanhood and anger and shame, is just to understand how patriarchy works. Because I think that's a really important part of revolution and subversion, is to understand the full effect of its placement in our lives and how it affects us, because then we can start to break away from those things and realize I'm internalizing this anger and it's now negatively affecting me. So how can I change that pattern while still living in this system? But the other thing, which you were mentioned, like why reclaim these feelings? Why connect to these feelings? I think it has a really beautiful way of unifying women in our experience, and it brings us closer together and allows us to fight together against these things. We can support each other in our emotional lives. So it's a very unifying force. And I related it to a whale song because it's like a call to each other, like bringing each other together and a call out. And yeah, so I really love the community element of it, and how that in itself can be a path towards liberation and healing, is just by acknowledging it and hearing each other and holding space for each other in all the anger and hysteria and love. It translates to love in that way when we can hold space for each other.
That is beautiful, truly, and it speaks to that importance of embracing the emotions that we have, allowing ourselves to even do that, out of fear of being labeled a Karen, out of fear to being called out, oh, you must be on your period, or PMSing or something because you're out of your mind, and things like that, without recognizing that there is a situation, like the experience of oppression and struggle that is beneath it, and that should be taken seriously no matter what's happening. Like, it's totally normal for men to go around punching walls, you know, the testaments of the fragile masculinity exhibitions. But on the other hand, a few months ago, we had that viral moment where a woman, directed by her therapist, was expressing anger by throwing ice pebbles in her shower. So nothing was getting broken, nothing was happening, there was not even a mess because it was just water in the shower, like, oh, God forbid. And the internet went nuts, because how dare she obviously is unstable enough, take away her children, like maybe she needs a lobotomy, like maybe she needs antidepressants, who's gonna marry her, like all of those things that people then say and project or threaten with, that then stops women from actually embracing those feelings as human. Like, it's normal to feel anger when you're frustrated when somebody is mistreating you. And if that anger can then be a tool for you to actually fight for your rights, for what you deserve. If there is no anger, just sadness, you might give up. You might find it too depressing or too impossible to ever change. But rage, on the other hand, can be a mobilizing moment for us and be like, nope, you know what? It's actually enough. And feminist rage is an exploration of that. So I really loved this poem specifically. And we have another episode from previous season with Moria from Estonia, who wrote a book, Listen to My Voice, Hear My Screams. And it also has that moment of collectiveness where women gather together and scream at the institution that is threatening them. So it's wonderful when we do things like that, and it can provide comfort and release and that mobilization to change something, and that can lead to not experiencing what you said, like the embodiment of oppressed anger, like when it manifests in chronic illnesses of some type or anything else. So it's important we let it out, and we have a right to do so, no matter who we are. Like, if the white man can do it, we can all do it. Like, that should maybe be like a slogan. Connor, in Rabbit's Chasing Tail, you call out colonial love specifically as something bound by repetition and by expectation that you have to perform that love, that you're in debt to somebody, and that love is then a way to pay off that debt. How do we then decolonialize love? And can you tell us more about reclaiming that place of a fearless, ferocious fuck?
This poem was also another assignment. I had a really wonderful prof that would allow us to express ourselves through poetry in a very vulgar way. And this one is the first time that I actually spoke that way through poetry. It was an interesting experiment for me. I think one thing where I talk about in that poem, and I think a few lines later, I talk about this kinky Boy Scout when I'm talking about ropes and rope play and those types of things. That same prof talks in their thesis about the decolonizing kink. And so how kink is something that comes from like this colonial power, and it lives through colonialism, and this idea of shaming and of pain is something that we live through colonialism because we're repressed and we're trying to break free from that. So I was trying to embody those kinds of sentiments. Also, as a queer person, I think sex is something that has always felt very shameful and very hard to talk in a public way. It's something that is made to feel very small, or as if if you're queer, your love is only through sex. When that's not the reality, but then it means we erase the conversation if we're trying to denounce it. And so it can be a difficult balance to really have those conversations. As a polyamorous person as well, this idea of love being non-stagnant and non-limiting, and just non-divisive. I think there's something beautiful about creating a community of love, whether that's friendships or romantic partnerships or sexual partnerships. This idea of expanding what relation is, relation with people around you. And even in very traditional Indigenous societies, like a lot of people were what we would call non-monogamous now. There's this idea that that religion has instilled in us of monogamy, of often non-ethical monogamy, where there's power and there's possession, and like we were talking about with private property, like we are seen as each other's property. And that's something that I try to unpack in my own life and in my writing, of just understanding that constraint that it feels. And so this idea of of rope play being something that counteracts this idea of being tied like a puppet. And so doing it voluntarily and having those conversations in a progressive way. Colonial love is very restrictive, repetitive. It's enforced. It's demanded. How many of us grew up being like, you have to hug these people when you leave. You have to say, I love you. And for me, in the mind that I have, if you tell me to do something over and over and over again, it loses its meaning. There's a really beautiful poem by Phil Kay called Repetition, where he goes over that same concept of just like, you repeat it so many times, it doesn't mean anything. And that's how I always felt about saying I love you. Especially when I was a child, I was just like, I love you and I can show you that, but if you make me repeat it, I won't. Like it removes all of its essence. And so I love you being something that's really odd to say in my mind. Same things with like physical touch, with hugging. That's something that like so many kids grow up being like, you have to hug these people when you come and when you go, and not having autonomy in your own body to do so. And I have really amazing like nieces and nephews, and their moms are badasses and in so many ways. And these kids, I'll be like, hey, uncle's leaving, and they'll be like, I don't want to hug today. And I'm like, yeah, cool. Thank you. Thank you so much for telling me that. Like, I am so proud. And like, I have to play it cool, because I should be like, yeah, high five then, you know? But in my mind, I'm just like, oh, how beautiful is that? I'm like sad a little bit, but I'm like, how beautiful is that you feel comfortable. You know that I will respect you when you say no, and you know that you can say it. And I'm just like, I'm just blown away every time. I'm like, I hope you say no, because then I know that you're like enacting that autonomy that you have. Um, so this poem speaks to all of those things, of like this rigidity, this like, oh my God, why do I have to keep doing it? And like, I'm neurodivergent. You tell me to do something, I'm gonna like, I want to do the whole opposite thing. It's just so much more fun. It's devious. It's kinky. It's like this aspect of playing with form, of changing perspective, of subverting what is expected of you, and often ended up with the same process, just making it so much more difficult for that person that is enforcing this system onto you. So when I think of that like colonial love, and of removing it, of having conversations and listening to each other, and so much of what we do in relationships is just mimicking what we've seen, and often as neurodiverse folks, it doesn't work. And so I've been in scenarios where we're two neurodiverse folks, and we're just like going through the motions of doing like, well, this is what I've seen done, and this is what I've had to do with other people, and like conversation in creation and all those things, and getting to a point where we're both like, is this what you like? Is this what you want to do? Is this helpful for you? And we're both like, no. And so being like, well, why don't we put that aside and do what feels natural and normal? And monogamy is a system that is enforced. If it has to have a policy, if it has to have like policies to enforce it, then it is not a natural state of being. With marriage, with having rights to children, having rights to health insurance, all of those things, then it is not a natural state of being. So unpacking those things is really important for me. Also, the idea of like rabbits chasing tail, rabbits or bunnies or any sort of little creature like that are trickster spirits in our stories. And so this idea of like subverting truth and being backwards beings is how we describe them. So like these rabbits spreading shame or like chasing each other's tails is like a play on sexuality, and also a play on like, I'm being different and I'm making you reflect on how odd this whole system is. By being so contrarian, you realize that none of your beliefs actually have foundations behind them. They're all enforced. So that poem kind of speaks to that. It's beyond this idea of simply sex, but reclaiming your body, reclaiming space, and reclaiming language. Like I use the Anishinaabemowin word for like the slang for sex being something that is actually very vulgar and gruesome to kind of share, but the slang of it just means to be with someone intimately. And so using those harsher terms in such a soft way is really beautiful, and that's how a lot of our young Nishnabs are like taking language and subverting it, and I wanted to shed light on that.
That is beautiful. You made some incredible points that I hope people will truly take to heart and, you know, get inspired and maybe think about ways that they can change the ways that they practice the art of love with the people around them, depending on what actually suits everybody included. I truly applaud the mothers of your nieces who are, you know, installing that right to personal boundaries, and for them to exercise that with people they trust, and to say no and to have that no respected. Like, and it will also mean more once they actually say, yes, I want you to hug me today, because then you'll know, okay, this person actually needs that hug today, or they want to give me that hug because they think I might need it. And that's beautiful, and it's not something that's forced, because if it's forced, it's not gonna hold too long, it's not gonna do any good in the end. So it's important that we have that. And also you mentioned kink, and in disability studies, when it comes to sexuality, kink is one of the things that gets explored, because it provides that space for exercising autonomy over your body that is being oppressed in some other way. So even if it might feel counterintuitive to some, because it's like, wait, you're experiencing pain in everyday life, in the medical system, in your like relationships and stuff like that, with institutions, but then you go to that intimate space of having sexual relations, and then you say, oh, I want to feel pain now. But the difference between those two things is, in that other scenario, it's on your own terms, it's consensual, and it's in a safe space, which is not something that's in that outside world. So that is actually a process of reclaiming like some parts of you and agency over your own body, and saying, yes, this is what I want to experience now, this is going to bring me some type of enjoyment, or this is going to bring me closer to other people. And it's not something that's been done to you just because you're lower on that imagined hierarchy or that you put in place to categorize people, animals, and everything else. So thank you for those points. One last piece of work from this anthology that I want to mention is your conjoined piece that both Lindsay and Connor you wrote. Can you tell us more about how that process then looked like your negotiations with each other, like what you wanted to say, what the other person wanted to say, what you wanted to say together, and then how it all came to be. The piece is called In the Aftermath of the Apocalypse. So what can you tell us about it?
I think we had a vague idea of what we wanted to discuss based on where the story was headed. I think we had a conversation about wanting to talk about colonialism and, you know, what we have shared, what we have in common, which is, you know, we're both living in Sudbury. We have seen where the anthology has taken us, and we wanted to really like build that pressure and put that together into like one final piece, one final call out for action and revolution. And that was like the heart of the book, as we've been talking about this whole time, is just, and we really wanted to condense that into a single piece. So strategically, how we went about it was we created a document, and one person just went in and added a few lines. And then the other person went in and built on it, and we kept going back and forth in that way. And we just did that until we had an outline, and we went back in and we added more imagery and metaphor. But we've talked about it so many times, how it came together so seamlessly, and it felt like we were just vessels. Well, I felt like for me, I was just a vessel, and this like inspiration and poetry was like being poured out through me. And like a common theme in the book is community and belonging. And although art can be so powerful, I think it's so crucial that you have community in that art, that can ground and uplift you when you need it, that can remind you that you're loved and you're valued and you're cherished, and that the work you're doing is important as well. So like one of my main takeaways from this poem and working on this project together with Connor was just that community element, and putting all these voices together was such a beautiful communal project with one another. And it was such a precious gift to get to work on this poem together. I think it's inspired us to work on more poetry together in the future. So what that's going to look like, I don't know. But yeah, it was a really kismet, seamless coalescence of ideas and creation.
And that actually translates into the poem itself, because I mean, I knew it's in the headline that you wrote it together, but I didn't feel it. Those were not two separate voices, each telling their own story. Those were two voices speaking in unison. That collaboration, you embodied it, and this poem is a testament of how artists can work together and convey a shared message. And it feels like one message and not like people pulling each in their own direction. So it speaks a lot about that collaboration and its potential. Connor, what are your experiences with this poem?
just want to say Lindsay is like such a wonderful person to work with. I think that we speak through a very similar lens, despite having very different experiences. There's so much that she could speak about Indigenous issues that I wholeheartedly would stand behind her on, and I know that if I spoke on issues with women in religion, there's so much that she would be able to stand behind me on. There's so much beauty in the way that we create collectively and apart. What I loved about this poem is, like we said, we really didn't know, like we had an idea, like here's what we want to say, but we're like, how do we actually do that? How do we convey? What's the form? Is it going to be a call and response? Is it going to be this? And Lindsay wrote a few lines, and I was just like, oh, what if I wrote the opposite of what she wrote? And that's kind of how the poem started. She would write these beautiful, like, images, and I'd go, what if it was the complete opposite? Or what if I used the exact same words, but just changed their form, changed what they're saying? And it became this like call and response in essence to this idea of what this nation stands for and what it means to be so-called Canadian. What is violence? What is genocide? What is this complacency that we're living through? And I think it just was so amazing to see, like Lindsay said, it was just flowing. It was like, I'm not even writing this. It was just like, as soon as she'd write something, I'm like, this is what's going next. And she would write something and I would, oh, this is what's going next. And it was really great to be able to do that. I've never had that experience with a poet before. I think I have a lot of friends who are poets that I write similarly to, but I think there's something special that Lindsay and I created, and I think it's not this poem was not possible without going through the editing process, without like living through the words of the other authors. We tried to also bring in some messages that were also shared through other poets. So there's like birds and this idea of reclaiming, and which speaks back also to the cover of the book. Just really trying to tie it together. And you could take the ending of the poem in different ways. You can see it as a hopeless cause. You can see it as something to keep fighting against, as something being chipped away. There's interpretation that can come in, and I think that's where we wanted to leave it, but really to mirror the beginning of the poem with the end, and try to subvert what that language is trying to say. But yeah, we're very excited to perform it for the first time during our book launch as well. So that'll be a really amazing experience.
Actually, wanted to ask you now if you'd like the page 68, I believe. It has those key moments from my reading perspective. I don't know how you imagine it as the writers, but when you write what is nation, what is history, what is land, what is future, can you maybe read us that part so that people can like resonate with what you're saying and connect it with actual like art form?
I can read it. What is a nation without its genocide? What is genocide if not a nation calling it coexistence? What is history if not repeating? A citizen is like its nation, idolized, independent, individual, complicit. Settler is the right word for something seemingly passive, but to settle is a choice to be empty, endlessly, devouring and devoured, to forever feast on the famished. I was born in an exemplary country, yes. Canada is a prime example of how to get away with murder, to be murdered again and never get away. I was born in a country exempt from accountability, yes. Canada is a prime number counting itself over and over again, forgetting first is a people they lose count of.
So good. Connor wrote that line and I lost my mind.
Yeah, I got goosebumps. Like, it's beautiful. It's a bit cocky, a bit on the nose, as it should be, because it is pointing out something that is problematic and something that we should confront, and that is the colonial, not only history of Canada, but also some things that they do in present that are not so kind and not so nice, definitely not equal or peaceful. So it's important that we realize that's still happening and that we need to do something about it. So I read in the aftermath of apocalypse as a call to action, as like, here is what's wrong, like here is what we are seeing, and all of these stories before about the importance of love and art and speaking out and building a community, they all show tools. So this anthology is like a handbook on how you can actually approach these topics and how you can make peace with it, but not in a way to give up. Like, oh no, yes, I now ingested that topic, I now know about it, I am holy from all the knowledge, and that's it. I can now kick my legs up and say I did my part. No, it's building something on the inside to make you go, no, we need to do something. What's the next step? Like, what are we gonna do now? So I love that it all builds into that moment. This is bringing us to almost the end of the episode. What are some of the feminist recommendations that you might have for us? You already mentioned some amazing books, some amazing people that we should all check, but if there is anybody else or anything else that you do in your private or professional life that brings you joy, that gives you hope, that fuels you in some way, now is the moment to share it.
Yeah, highly recommend. There are a lot of amazing women poets that just they bring me so much joy and hope. And Britta Badur would be one of them. Let me just see if I can get that book. Wires That Sputter. It's a beautiful book if you're into spoken word as well, because she writes as she would say it out loud. So that's a really cool thing as well. And then I think something that just like recharges me. Life can get so busy and you're like this little hamster on a wheel and like constantly looking for a place to rest. And wherever that rest is for you, whether it's spending time with friends or family, or savoring time with yourself, to really prioritize that time. I have been really enjoying some like just alone time where I just shut the world out and listen to music. And that's just, that recharges my batteries. So that can be really beautiful, reading and just spending some time by myself.
It's amazing. I love that point about rest, because it's very easy to get caught up in that hamster wheel, especially with all the hustle culture and the apocalyptic vibes and everything else. It feels like we're running out of time. Like we're not gonna make it. Like, what are we gonna do? And it can actually cause more harm than good. So it's important to sometimes just take a little step back and realize, okay, this is actual picture. Now that I can see it whole, let me recuperate myself a little bit and then get back to it. So I love it, and I hope that people will also read the books and find some inspiration in it as well. Connor, what about you?
Just finished reading Abolitionist Intimacies by E.L. Jones. It is something that inspired my research. It is this beautiful blend of story and poetry, and it goes back and forth, and there's always a poem reflecting each chapter. Amazing activist in the Black communities and Indigenous communities for the abolition of like the carceral state and all of those wonderful systems that need to be torn down. So I highly recommend it. I also have been reading Frey Malik's Streams That Lead Somewhere. Amazing poet and human being. We got the opportunity to meet with him at our last Wordstock Festival in Sudbury, and just like an amazing mind that goes so far, and the way he performs and the way he writes, so distinct and so beautiful. Just highly recommend those two. And as far as recharging, I love being on the land, and so anytime that I'm out in the bush, often when it's like cutting wood or relaxing or doing all those things, that's really recharging, or the process of creation. So sitting down and sewing for absolutely hours, beading, those things for me are so beautiful, and so allow me to reclaim, which is something that recharges me. So Chimigwech for that question.
There is that meditative process that happens when we're working with our hands that lets the brain just rest for a little bit. And then in the end you have some beautiful creation or something useful. So it's a great way to, like, for people who might, we say it in our country, have worms in their butt, so they can sit still. Like, if it's too ingrained in you, or if you're neurodivergent or something, it might be difficult to completely like shut down and say, no, I'm gonna sit now and stare in a like blank spot. That can only work if you have some deadline you have to work on, but it's not gonna work if you want to rest. So it's important to find those other things where you can kind of like fidget, but still not doom scroll or be all head in your work and stuff like that. Like, to remove yourself from that pressure to be monetarily productive or socially acceptable productive. Like we have those other ways to do it. And we have come to the end of the episode. So if you have some type of message to the audience, a call for action, if you want to give a shout out to anybody, if you want to let us know where to find the anthology, now is the moment for that.
We will have our book launch on April 5th in Sudbury, where we will officially be able to celebrate the end of this process, which has been really amazing, and it'll be available in person. We each will have the opportunity to come to communities if ever anyone wants any readings. We are both willing to travel and accommodate those types of things. Lindsay, where else can the book be found? I only know of the in-person initiatives here.
So it's now available for pre-order on the publisher's website. So that's latitude46publishing.com. So you can pre-order it there. And then after April 5th, when the book comes out, you can also order it on that website. And you'll be able to get it from indie bookstores around Canada. You can order it from All Lit Up, which is an indie bookstore seller. And I think it's available through more mainstream booksellers as well. I just wanted to say to thank you so much, Aurora, for holding this space for us and for inviting us on your show and for being so intentional with your questions. You're an amazing interviewer. Thank you for having these important conversations. And then to anyone listening, I just want you to know that your voice is important and it can be life-changing for another person. So to never doubt yourself. That's it.
Thank you so much for the kind words. I was worried that I'm not gonna do you justice because it's a beautiful anthology. There are so many directions this conversation could have gone into, so it was hard to just pick one track and stick to it. But you were a wonderful guest, and I'm so honored to have you. And thank you, Holly, for getting us all in touch so that we can meet. I hope that people will find ways to reach out to you and invite you for readings or for mic nights or slam poetry, because I'm sure that it will be a lot of fun. And thank you once again for echoing that message that you don't have to be perfect to speak out. We all have that right. We should all exercise that right because we need it, and we never know who might find those words inspirational or if it might spark some type of action in our community, in some other community, and that the type of transfer of hope and joy and everything else is incredibly important, and we need it now more than ever, I believe. So thank you once again, both of you, for this beautiful conversation. I hope that people will find the book in indie stores. Don't order from the overlords of the Amazon and stuff like that. Support your local initiatives. Also in Canada, if you are part of the Canadian Writer Association, or how is it called, you also get royalties from libraries. So if anybody wants to support you, they can also request your book to be available in their libraries as well. And I hope it will also end up in some book clubs in Canada and abroad alike.
Thank you so much for having us on.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a great rest of your day.
Have a nice day.
Bye. Nice to meet you.
And that will be all for today's episode. Thank you all for watching, for sticking around. I hope that you enjoyed this one, that it inspired you to think about some new ways to approach decolonizing, to approach enjoying your love for zombie movies and apocalypse fiction and stuff like that. And I hope that you're also practicing love for yourself and with others as well, in a decolonialized way, in cherishing the connections that you have, in celebrating the differences and the strengths of everybody included, and that you're finding ways to negotiate some types of agency building opportunities when it comes to institutional oppression. We all need to find ways to resist, to revolt, and to build that new world that we all so much deserve. Thank you all for watching this. Thank you, Lindsay and Connor, once again for this wonderful conversation, for this wonderful book that you gifted us all, and I wish you all the best in all your slam poetry competitions. What is it? Oh, you want to hear more about the book club we're starting at Just Feminism? Well, why didn't you say so? I know just the person to ask. Domenica, can you help us?
Hi guys, my name is Domenica. This is my cat Dundo, and we're excited for our first appearance on the It's Just Feminism podcast. I've been working on the podcast since the beginning, more in the backseat, but now I'm ready to meet you guys in person and share my ideas and projects I've been working on with my colleague and friend Aurora. I also have some other exciting news, and that is that we're starting a feminist book club.
What?
Where we will be talking, reviewing, and discussing literature from a feminist perspective. And you can find more information in the description in the link of this video. And of course, leave your recommendations and the books you want us to review in the comments below.
See you some other time. Bye!